Hi, my name's Carly. Welcome to my sewing studio. Today I want to make one of my favourite patterns from 2024, and that is the garden dress by Frux Studios. Some of you may have seen or heard of this pattern. It is so beautiful. I was lucky enough to test it earlier in the year, and this is the garment that I ended up creating. It's a dress with the crew neck view and also the sleeveless view, and I made it out of some IKEA bed sheets. Since creating my first option, I've been dying to make another one of these views, and the one that I want to make with you is this crew neck blouse with no sleeves as well. I could rave on and on about this pattern. I have worn my garden dress so many times since I created it. It's comfortable, I can layer it, it feels luxurious, and yeah, I'm really excited to make another one with you guys. Let's go! I already cut out all of my pattern pieces, so we're ready to construct. One of the biggest parts of the construction of this garment actually is doing all of the pin tucks. I think this number of pin tucks can be a little intimidating from afar, but let me encourage you, if you wanted to make a pattern like this, they're really simple to create. It just takes a lot of patience and time making sure each pin tuck is even and sewed well. But it's not difficult. Very doable. Anyway, yeah, I think the first thing I need to do is to create these pin tucks. That's going to take a while, so let's get into it. I'm putting my horsey mic away now. This is the fabric I selected for this project. It is 100% cotton and it has these micro stripes all over it. It's from Spotlight. It's pretty cute. Also, I'm not going to go too in depth about every single step of this process because I don't want to reveal all of the pattern's secrets, but I will show you some of my favorite construction techniques from it. Something to be noted is when I printed out my pattern, I printed out every single size, but apparently you can actually select one layer of the PDF pattern and it will print just the size that you require. So yes, this is what it looks like when you get every single size of pin tucks. Kind of horrific. Don't be like me, just print the one size. Also, just so you know, I believe I sit around the size 6 mark for this dress, but I have decided to make it in a size 10. The size 6 would be totally appropriate, but I just enjoy having a slightly baggier garment. I just feel it has a little bit more ease, a bit more comfort, and especially with my dress version of this garment, I've been able to layer things underneath it. This is me signifying the layering, and I love to layer. Okay, it's pin tuck time. Because the bodice is completely filled with pin tucks, it's pretty important that they look good, and to make them look good, it's critical that you have some great marking tools so that you can create even and accurate lines of where your pin tucks need to be. I just wanted to show you what my pattern looks like so that you can see how the pin tucks are displayed. But basically there will be 3 lines for each pin tuck. The middle one, of course, is the center line, and then the outside lines signify how you will fold the fabric, and then those 2 lines will line up. I know that this looks crazy, but it's actually fairly simple. The only other really critical markings are going to be these drill marks right along the bottom, and that will show you where each pin tuck needs to finish. It's also really important to mark the top of where the pin tucks are so that you can get nice, straight ruler markings. I realize this might be sounding a little bit boring and mathematical, but the reason I'm so passionate about it is because when you succeed in making all of your pin tucks nice and clean and accurate, it's so satisfying. They look beautiful and it's like, yes, I did that. So I am passionate about the process. It is just one of those sewing techniques that you need to really lean into and enjoy the methodical and slow and repetitive nature of it. Because if you want to rush through a process like this, I think it's just going to be not fun. You're probably not going to get a great result and it will just be sad. So yeah, I'm going to take my own advice and pensively and gratitudinally mark out all of my pin tucks. But before I do that, I am really excited to share today's sponsor of the video, Mrs. Quilty. Mrs. Quilty does quilting subscription boxes that are sent out every month for quilters of every skill level from beginner to advanced, so everyone can have fun and learn new skills and techniques. Inside the box you'll find a selection of high quality curated quilting fabrics. In my box I received 12 100% cotton fat quarters in this beautiful blue red, and white color scheme. You'll also find exclusive error-free quilting patterns and guides, and you may even find some additional quilting tools, supplies, and notions, which is very exciting if you're a beginner quilter like me, and all of these things are kind of new and unheard of. Like in my box this month, I got this really cool ruler and some pins. Very exciting. With the Mrs. Quilty subscription, you'll receive a new box every month, and you have complete control over your subscription, so you can pause or cancel it at any time with no hassle, which is kind of great if you need a little bit more time and freedom in between your quilting projects. I'm really new to quilting, so my Mrs. Quilty box has been a really great way to learn some new skills and terminology and just get some more hands-on practice with the craft. The patterns and guides have helped make the project feel really approachable, and I'm so excited to just keep learning from this kit. So if you want to join the Mrs. Quilty community of like-minded crafters, I have a discount code for you in the description of this video. It's 20% off your first order, so jump on it if you are keen, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I have. Thank you so much to Mrs. Quilty for sponsoring this video, and let's get back into garden blouse making. Time to mark these pin tucks. A critical error that I made the first time I made this dress was I marked all of my pin tucks in my air erasable marker, and then I waited a day or two to sew them all up. And by the time I had returned to my project, most of them were completely faded. So this time I'm only going to be marking the panel that I'm working on, and I will mark as I sew because I don't want to risk them fading. Marking all the pin tucks is quite overwhelming, especially if you have every size grading on your pattern, but you just have to take it one pin tuck at a time and trust the process. You'll see I've made little splits right at the top of my pattern so that I can see where the top of the pin tuck is, and then I've made little holes in the bottom of the pattern so I can see where the pin tuck ends. And I'm just marking each of those. Then what I do is just line up my ruler and draw a connecting line from the top mark to the bottom mark for every single marking. Now I'm just going to repeat that marking process for all 17 pin tucks. Mind you, the 17 pin tucks, just one half of the back. So we have the back, and the front. It's a lot of work. But I do not mind because I love pin tucks. Also, you know that girl from Spy Kids that can do a hair like this, makes it spin like that? Oh, I'm gonna trigger my vestibular issues. Did I look cool? Alright, all of my pin tuck markings have been completed on the back and the front panel, which means it's time to get into the primary construction of the bodice. I think I just need to put the back two pieces together and finish off the opening at the back of the bodice, and then it is time for the pin tucks. Back together, and if that's true. All of the seams in this piece are French seams, so it's wrong sides together, not right sides together. I did the French seam, and then right at my notch I did a small diagonal stitch and then proceeded to do the rest of my stitching at 1/4 inch. This is one of my favourite ways to finish the back of a blouse or dress now. Ever since I learned it from this pattern, I've been addicted to it. It's so good. But basically I French seamed, I trimmed that seam allowance, and then I cut in as close as I could to that little diagonal stitch, gave it a press, of course pressed it again so it was wrong sides out, and then you stitch at the 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down and a little bit past that notch, so probably like 1/8 inch or 1/4 inch. That'll do it. Then I just folded over these little pieces of seam allowance and created a tiny little triangle at the bottom, and it's so neat, tidy, clean. I just love it. That's all. Please enjoy these clips of me doing it, and if you do a finish like this in the back of your dress or bodice, you can thank Erin from Frux Studios for teaching it to us collectively, because it's kind of amazing. Now that the back is sewn together, it is time to conquer the pin tucks. I just did one to make sure I could remember how to do it, and I can. It's very simple, so let me show you. So basically, to do the pin tuck, you fold your fabric so that there's this fold line right along the middle line of the pin tuck markings. I line up the drill mark and make sure the center of that is on the fold, and I line up the center notch at the top and make sure that is on the fold. And then in theory, the two parallel lines on either side of the center line should be at 1/4 inch marking away from the edge. And that's going to be the stitch line. Pattern says to finger press, but I like to give it a proper press. I find that pressing that seam so it's nice and flat is all I need to do in order to sew. I don't need to pin it or anything like that. It's kind of just good to go. All of the pin tucks on this pattern are sewn at 1/4 inch seam allowance. So luckily for me on my industrial, that is the exact size of my presser foot. So that's really easy. But hopefully on your domestic, you should have an indicator of where the 1/4 inch seam allowance is. So that'll help you with your pin tuck sewing. And just so you know, I'm not back stitching at the top of the seam, only at the bottom where the drill mark is. And that's because later in the process, once all the pin tucks are sewn, I'll cut the neckline shape into the pattern, and all of those stitches will be unpicked so that they go right underneath that neckline, and I'll tie them together so they're nice and finished that way. Last time I made this, I did a lot of back stitching, and then it's just harder to unpick your work through the back stitching. So that's my hot tip. And that's how you pin tuck. Now to repeat that process about 65 more times. Also, do you guys know that song they sing on Broadway when the cast members go off to do other shows? It's called Happy Trails. It's like, happy trails to you until we meet again. I feel like you guys should sing that to me right now because I'm going away for a very long time to do these pin tucks. I'll see you in the future. Happy trails to you. I'm getting there. Howdy partners. All my pin tucks are sewn. I was being awfully dramatic. It did not take anywhere near as long as I imagined. I think it was really timely for me the first time around because I was being meticulous. And this time around I challenged myself to sew as fast as I could. And I guess that way I could compare the performance between my two approaches. For example, my first time I made the garden dress, I ironed every single pin tuck individually before sewing it, and this time I did no ironing. I didn't even finger press. I just folded the fabric in half, lined up that center line, and sewed all the way down. I think it actually looks totally fine, and I think that once I press it, it's going to be indistinguishable from the one which I was meticulous sewing. I think it was around 65 pin tucks, and from drawing to sewing all of them, like 3 to 4 hours. Not too bad. That was me racing. I just washed them so I could get all of the markings out, and whilst my other panel dries, I'm probably going to go for a walk, and then I can begin constructing the rest of the bodice, which I'm really looking forward to. Okay, you probably didn't need to sing Happy Trails to me. It was fine actually. Good morning, it's the next day. The first thing I need to do today is organize the necklines for the back and the front bodice pieces. Ordinarily as a patchworker I would just chop right through all of these seams and do some hodgepodge back stitching to try and keep all the pin tucks in order, but I happen to really love and appreciate the construction instructions for this portion of the bodice, so I want to show you the technique for bringing all of your threads down to where the neckline is going to be. It's pretty cool. Once the pin tucks are all pressed in the right direction, you use the back template or the front template depending on where you're working. Basically you just need to trace where that pattern piece is, and it's going to give you the outline for where your neckline is going to be. It's approximate, so it's not going to be perfect, and I'll make any adjustments if it looks wonky. Like that is a great example of a slightly wonky look. So the technique basically is to unpick this thread until it goes to 1/8 of an inch below the line that you just marked. That's good. And then you pull on that thread and this loop will come up, which is actually from the bottom of the stitching. And with your two threads, which will essentially be the top thread and your bobbin thread, you double knot them and that will function as a back stitch. So now we have this pin tuck beautifully secured right underneath the pattern marking line. If I were going to rush this step, I would probably just cut right through where the template is and do a bunch of back stitching in a really small stitch length, and I think it would be completely fine. But I just find this detail to be quite endearing. And whenever I make clothes that I spent the extra effort doing little finishes and details on, I just feel real special wearing them because I know the story behind the making of it. You don't have to though. There's no winners or losers in this game. There's only sewing and having fun. And if you're not having fun unpicking and hand tying 70 pin tuck threads, then don't. The goal is to make clothes and have fun, I would say. I'm just a freak and I do in fact think it's fun to get stuck in a process like that. Both my bodice pieces are fully complete now and the fabrication is looking divine. Anyway, I'm excited because now I can just start making the bodice and things should come along really fast now. It's looking really cute. The next thing that I want to do just to get it out of the way is prep all of my bindings. So it's the neck hole binding, the sleeve hole bindings, and I'm also going to prepare all 4 ties that go at the sides just here. I might even prep the buttonhole loop and the facing as well. Just do all of my little details. So I think my brain would like that. Can I just say how much I love it when a pattern comes with pattern pieces for things like bias tape and ties and such. I just love not having to measure out all of these details by myself. It's like, switch your brain off, queen. Just cut those pieces of fabric out. And oh boy, do I love it.
I know she's gonna scream, pink pony girl.
I think a big part of the mental load when I'm making other people's patterns is the fact that there's a lot of tasks that I personally would put together, but in the pattern, they're separate. And that's totally fine, but it just means you really have to be switched on the whole time. So this being my second time making this, I've made an effort to try and group similar tasks together so that I get less fatigued. For example, creating all of my binding, ties, and facing. Those tasks are all fairly similar. I think they're friends. Anyway, whatever. My loop turn is like a little bit broken, so it's really fidgety to work with. I'm curious if anyone who watches my videos has studied tailoring before, or maybe you just are a tailor. And if that's you, how did you learn? Where did you go to school? Or if you didn't go to school, what resources did you use? And do you like it? I just keep getting a lot of tailoring videos on my Instagram and TikTok. And just the techniques involved seem kind of different from regular sewing. And I'm all around just very curious about the whole thing. So yeah, if you've got a second and you're a tailor or like a tailoring student or something like that, tell me your story. I'm really interested and I would love to learn more. Thanks. These are buttons from my grandma's stash. I'm not sure which one to use, guys. Let me know which one you prefer. I like the size of this one more, and I like the color of this one more. I don't have anything perfectly matching, but that's okay. I think I'm gonna do the smaller, slightly mismatching blue one, because I do actually quite like it. I'm going to do the binding now. Let's go! I kind of filmed these in quite some depth so you can see me attaching the binding, but basically it's right sides together, and at the end of the back I folded over that binding a tiny little bit so it's a nice clean edge. I then understitch it so that the seam allowance is pressed up into the binding, and then I worked on my little buttonhole loop. I basically just had to measure that there was enough room for the button to pass through, but not too much room so that it would just kind of slip right out. Then I can roll over my bias tape so that it lays to the inside of the garment and top stitch it down. I also top stitched all of my ties in at the notch points. Now I'm not 100% sure on how to do this section because I've only ever done it as the dress format, But basically there are these little side panels and they go on either side of the blouse. And I'm pretty sure that what needs to happen is they just get inserted into the side, French seamed on both sides. I'm just gonna go ahead and do that. This is the back of the dress. So we'll line that up wrong sides together with the back of the dress piece. Okay, that makes sense. I always do this where it's like, oh, after this task I'll have lunch. After this task I'll have lunch. And it just keeps getting closer and closer to finishing the project and it's like, still haven't eaten my lunch. I'm coming to lunch soon. Just let me devour these French seams first, LOL. I think making this pattern for the first time showed me that you can do French seams in a really clean and polished way. Every time I had done them previously, they ended up looking really clunky and like there was so much fabric in them. But this pattern showed me how to do them pristine. And what's the other word? Accurate. Okay, snip that seam allowance down to 1/8. I know I've talked about this before, but that's why I love doing other people's patterns so much, is because you always pick up a new technique. Or even if it isn't new, you might just get a new understanding of how to do it well. And I find that to be a very valuable experience. Press, press, press. French seam it, baby. Gonna enclose that seam for a finish that is pristine. French seam for a finish that is pristine. French seam for a finish that will gleam. French seam, a detail that no one will see. French seam. Fantastic. I'm gonna proceed to treat myself to doing that exact same process on the other side. The lunchtime hungries have set in. French seam for a finish that no one can see. Why is it called French seam? I'll just see you when this is done. How about that? French seam. Okay. The sides are on. It's looking very nearly done. All that's left is sewing on the button, binding the armholes, and adding the facing to the hem. Awesome. I am gonna eat now, so I stop deliriously making up French seam musical numbers, and then I'm gonna come back and finish this. Okay. I'm back. Let's do this. The armhole binding is complete. I think the next time I make this garment, I'll take off 1 centimeter off either of the shoulders. It's not a problem, it's just sitting right on the edge of my shoulder, and I would prefer it to sit just a little bit before. Doesn't matter, but that's a note to future Carly. I sewed my hem facing together at the side seams and then pinned it right sides together with the bodice, dispersing all of that fabric as best as I could. And I sewed that together at 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then I understitched it as well so it would lay nice and flat. The next step is to press the seam allowance down on the other side of the hem facing. I'm making mine about 1 centimeter pressed over. That's fine, I think. And then once that's done, you can fold the hem facing completely to the wrong side of the blouse or dress or skirt and give it a good press and pin it down. I often do find myself having slight problems in distributing the fabric in my hem facings. Sometimes there's a little bit of excess or a little bit of not enough, and I just have to play around until it fits properly or fits good enough. I just rang my boyfriend to see how his day was going, and when we talked, I secretly sewed on the button and I finished the edges of all of the ties, which Erin, the pattern maker of this pattern, says you should hand stitch them. So of course I hand stitched them, although you could just run your machine right over it. I'm really excited about this. I already knew that I love the pattern, so it's just a winner. I'm gonna put this on, tell you my final thoughts, and show you the finished product. Oh, also, I haven't done this in ages, but I would like to get back into the habit of doing this. When I have a nice thick hem or a hem facing, I really like to add little hand-stitched name badges. Oh, it's so special. Here's another example of the name badge. It's just so lovely to sew it into a place that no one will see, but as the years go on, you'll be able to appreciate your craftsmanship. Ah, really special. Oh my gosh! Another dress pattern in which I had to make the dress and the top version. Robert's Wood. How could you not? Alright, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna get ready. Then I'm gonna show you. Okay. Okay, final thoughts. There are basically no notes that I have for the construction of this piece. The only thing I would do is take off about 1 centimeter off this shoulder seam here, and that's just personal preference, but everything else is beautiful. Huge fan of how many different varieties there are of this dress. I've made it crew neck and sleeveless in the dress and shirt format now, and you can do it with a V-neck or with sleeves, and of course you can adjust the length to wherever you want it to sit, which I think is fantastic. Variety really does add value in my eyes. I know I've raved about this pattern a lot on my channel, but Erin, the pattern maker from Frux Studios, also deserves a rave review. The pattern is meticulous. There is clearly a lot of care and consideration put behind these instructions. They're really easy to follow, and I think that there are some technical points in this pattern, but she's broken them down and simplified them in a way that feels approachable and digestible. I just have to congratulate her so much for her hard work because it is truly a delightful pattern. Anyway, that's enough raving from me. If you make this pattern, I really hope you enjoyed as much as I do. Please let me know if you do. I'd love to see your versions of it. Usually at this point in the video, I would ask you guys a question, but today I actually wanted to open up the comment section and see if you guys had any questions for me. Ask away, my friends. I would be delighted to answer any and all of your questions. I'll answer them in my upcoming videos, or if there's enough questions, I'll just make a video encompassing all of your questions. So, yeah. And with that, it is time for the final reveal. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. If you want more content from me, of course you can find more videos on YouTube, but you can also find me on Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, Patreon, and my website where I make happy handmade clothes. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!